question for the crowd, of course. Everyone is a creative professional, trying to be professional, working on it, or using it as a survival technique to distract from their normal non-creative job. Is that an accurate representation of? Okay, sweet. So what I'm going to talk about, my name is Mike. I am the creative director for NMU, and I run a little side business too. And all in all, I put stubborn MFer here because I, like many young people getting started in the creative career, didn't really understand exactly what collaboration was. We'll go into that. But the point of taking away from today is how that can get you unstuck, because as we build ourselves on our own isolated little, I'm doing me, it can really start to eat at you. Really start to eat at your creative process, really start to make you feel a little bit alone. So let's get into that. As I said, I'm late to the collaboration party, and I preface things always before I do a presentation by saying, I'm probably gonna have some typos in here. I also said on the previous slide that I'm stubborn. My wife asked me if I'd like, she's like, can I proofread your presentation? And I was like, no, I don't need that. So if I put this disclaimer in here, gives me a pass. Go up front with it, right? I've been in a little bit of background just so people can figure out what I'm talking about. I graduated from NMU in 2009. Went out to the East Coast. I made snowboards for a couple big snowboard companies. Moved back to Detroit, worked in the auto industry for a hot minute. Clearly loved that enough to stay there for less than a year. And then moved up here to work for a creative agency in town called Elegant Seagulls, and then switched over to NMU. And I've been there for, about 7 years at this point, which in millennial years are like dog years. So I feel like I've been there for 30 years. So that's what I've been doing, and it's been incredible being a part of the creative culture that's been brewing here in Marquette, because I'm only seeing it expand and expand and expand, and that's really cool. So, of course, a huge please shout out to Revolve for doing this, right? Like, is that crazy that we have a creative conference here? Yes. And so as, of course, I've joked with Keith about this, is if you're going to start a creative conference, there's no better time to start a conference than right in the middle of a global pandemic. But sometimes it'd be like that. But as creatives, right, we're kind of we kind of got to lean into the idea of being pivotable, being able to make changes, being able to look at something and say, okay, this sucks. Let's change things. So I give a lot of credit to everyone who puts us on. So thank you guys for giving us hope that we'll keep moving forward, right? It's every big presentation we start off, and I'm like, what's the definition of collaboration? And I found out that this was the second definition under obvious working with others to create the. How about this? It's literally in the dictionary. Traitorous cooperation with an enemy. I was like, that actually fits perfect for this presentation. Because you're like, what? Do I have enemies? You do. Put a mirror up to yourself, and you are the enemy. Or in some other cases, we look at each other like enemies. What? But we're all creative people here. I'll explain. I want to talk about hustle culture, because these two things are intertwined. Is everyone familiar with the concept of hustle culture? Is there anybody who's like, what are you talking about? Let me tell you a little bit about hustle culture. So hustle culture is this idea that we have perpetuated amongst ourselves as entrepreneurs to go out and bleed for your craft. You have to go out there, you have to destroy yourself to prove to everyone that you're gonna Jeff Bezos this thing, and launch yourself into space with how awesome your project are and the motivation you've got to send yourself off this planet to go destroy the next one, right? Hustle culture is a part of creativity because a lot of us oftentimes are working as independent contractors. We're launching our own businesses. We're starting things that haven't been done. And you have to have motivation that's built into that to keep that motivation going, to keep this idea going, to break through all of those reasons why you keep saying no and no and no, right? So sometimes if you're on Facebook or any of these other destructive social media platforms, you'll see stupid stuff like this. A picture of someone from pop culture in a show taken out of context with a quote from a writer that isn't the actor in the picture, probably like Leonardo DiCaprio and Wolf of Wall Street or something like that, right? And it's like misquoted and taken out of context and completely slaps anyone who's a writer in Hollywood completely in the face because then people think that Leonardo DiCaprio actually said the lines that he was not paid to write. Okay? So I see this stuff. I see stupid stuff like this that's like, give me a shovel and I'll dig myself out of a I'm like, okay. But we see this stuff because it's often associated with the idea of being an entrepreneur and seizing that. And I'm going to find some stupid movie that motivates me to go out and try to make $1 million. By the way, Jordan Belfort, the guy from Wolf of Wall Street, went to prison for a very long time. So anyone I see that's like, yo, get this money, and then they post a picture of like a convicted convict who literally stole money from me, I'm like, it's weird. It's a weird, right? Like weird flex. When I see this stuff, what I really look at is I say that I'm scared of someone taking my opportunity. And that's really important because when we think of collaboration, we're just getting started and we're trying to defend our own skill set, right? We're trying to defend the idea that we're building something in our head. I have this skill set. I graduate with 20 other kids in my class. We've all got the same skill set. And you're kind of looking at each other being like, all right, if someone was to walk in and say, hey, I got money for a logo, who wants it? Then there's 20 other people that are like, hey, I know how to do that. I know how to do that. I know how to do that, right? And you're like, oh, why are they going to pick me, right? And it starts getting to you that you realize that your skill set, especially once we got connected to each other over social media, over platforms like Dribbble, all these other things, it starts to make you be like, dang, I'm actually not that special. But I don't use it like that, right? You got to use it in terms of thinking like, okay, I'm not that special. Do I use that as a way to motivate myself? Think about that. And why do we think like this? This is really important. We get into these patterns, right? We get into these patterns of kind of either doubting ourselves or we get into these patterns of comparing ourselves. Oh, I do this all the time, even as a person who doesn't really have anything to prove. More, I pay for things with my creative skills. Like, I don't know, I guess that by default makes me a creative professional, right? But I'm still like this really good college student that I'm helping train. Are they gonna take my job someday? Anybody else, like, it's hard, like, you go on Instagram, yeah, right, yeah, there's some people who are like, yes, I have too, also felt like that. So we get our education. We remind ourselves to keep learning. We get our degrees from our programs. And the way that education oftentimes is set up, it's a business model, right? The best education that we can do, and I work with students every day, the best education that we can do is give you a generalized toolbox of different tools, different things that we have so that you'll go out and be successful. We can't give you, if someone says, hey, I'm going to build something. Okay, what are you going to build? I don't know. Okay. I'm going to give you some tools. I'm going to give you a hammer, some nails, a couple screws, a screwdriver, a saw. I'm going to assume those are generalized things that I think that you need to get started. building whatever it is that you think you want to build, because you don't know what you want to build, but you got to build something. Well, these tools seem to work pretty well. So we're just going to give you this general set of tools for a toolbox. That's kind of how education is, because we want you to be able to go out and be successful at the start before you've figured out how to narrow yourself in. But education is difficult like that, because you can go out and compare yourself. Like, I see students who come in and they ask, they're like, hey, how do I do this? And I look at this illustration, this poster of this artist that's been drawing for 30 years. And sometimes I don't have the heart to look at him and go, if you want to do that, you have to draw for 30 years. Because that's the truth, right? That's the truth. That some people have been doing this long enough, and we look at this result and we say, well, I can break it down. It's just paint on paper. It's just paint on canvas. Why can't I do that? Well, sometimes skills take time, right? But when we see something on YouTube that's short enough to keep our attention span, we look at YouTube and we're like, oh, it's a 5-minute movie on how to, or 5-minute video on how to make it in as a Hollywood graphic designer. You're like, oh, sweet, I don't even watch this video, I'm good. It doesn't exactly work like that, but we got to get the clicks, we got to get students through, we've got to get them out into the workforce with their generalized toolbox, right? So we could start to feel like that, because we look back, we get frustrated, we think about that. Economics also tells us that everything is a competition, right? That your skill set, no matter what it is, if you go on, I got a Canon 5D camera, I'm a photographer, and then the next person shows up and goes, yeah, me too. You're like, ugh, I got to buy more lenses then, because then that person doesn't have the same lenses. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because we're at the concept doing the same thing. And economics will tell us that, like, everything is a competition. Some business is moving up. Some person is getting contracts. Something. The competition mindset is also real, and there's no shaking that. Let's think about that. We're good. Our clients want more out of us, but they don't want to pay for it. Anyone have a client like this? Oh no, look at us, our collective misery together. And there's one of those people in here is that client, and they're like, oh boy, I hope that's not me. But this is a really good point. If you have clients and they trust you and they give you money, you have this relationship with them, right? I want to keep this person happy. I want to keep this business happy. I want to keep that money coming in so that I can pay for stuff and keep my life moving forward, right? And if they ask you more times, we kind of have this built-in fear of saying, I don't really know how to do that. Or, yeah, I could recommend some people, and they go, oh, well, how much more is that going to cost? And is there anybody who does web here? The websites. People are like, hey, you make a website? I'm like, absolutely, I do. Here's the price. And they're like, cool, let's do that. And I'm like, oh, let me remind you, though, I don't code websites, but I design them. Because sometimes those are different, or if I'm the same person, I charge you for both jobs. Client's like, what do you mean? I'm like, the guy who designed your car isn't the mechanic. Oh, right, okay. So I don't want to pay for that, so what do we do? Yeah, right? Employers want us to be Swiss Army knives. We're seeing this generalized fight back of the working class right now, which is pretty spiriting in my opinion. But we're seeing this idea that we keep getting asked oftentimes as in-house people to keep piling on more. Hey, do you know how to do this? You're like, I guess I could. They're like, go on YouTube and learn how to figure it out in 5 minutes. You're like, I guess so. Sure. So our employers want us to have, right, this, like, is anybody here new to the recently graduated within the last 3 or 4 years? Hey, right? You go on, you're like, okay, entry-level job, must have 5 years experience. What? How does that, I'm not computing, right? Because that's like clients or employers are basically trying to get the most qualified person for the cheapest amount of money, the lowest price. That's kind of how everything works, right? Low, high export. So they want us to be Swiss Army knives. They want us to have all of these skill sets that have value, especially if you're good at them. but they don't want to pay for it because they just want to put it up front and say, hey, well, you accepted the job, right? So we have this discord that makes us start to get in our heads, like, but I know all this stuff. Why is this like, why am I feeling this tension in me that now I have to be 6 different people, right? A Swiss Army knife, I've got 6 different tools. Well, I've got all these different compartments in my brain for the knowledge that I've been building up, right? And the other idea that we have is when we reach out, part of the problem when we reach out to people and we ask people, hey, do you want to work on this project with me? And a person gets kind of tuckered out on it. I helped you out with this thing. I'm kind of tapering off here. Then we're like, no one cares about this project, whatever this project is, as much as me. I'm the only person who cares about this. There's probably a sign that the other person that you invited to be a part of the project doesn't feel like maybe they're completely bought into it. Maybe they're not being compensated. Maybe there's something in it that makes them feel like, yeah, I'm not getting the same amount out of it. So it's very easy to look at, not project on ourselves, like, why don't you care about this as much, right? This is my baby. This is my project. I'm working on this. Why can't I get people to care about this? We get in these patterns, right? We get in these patterns about thinking about what makes collaboration hard, because I think at some point, all of us as creative professionals have hit one of these points. Is that right? You see something on here and you're like, yo, that's me, right? Plus, social media, yay, yo, I got a new client, check me out, boo, selfie, right? And then everyone else is looking and be like, damn, I didn't get that job. I'm not getting that opportunity. I'm not blah, blah, blah. I'm comparing myself. Has anyone compared themselves online to someone else, right? It's like when people have a baby. Here's my kid. They're beautiful. They're perfect. They're a sweet little angel. Ain't nobody posting a picture at 2 a.m. when they're crying going, yo, parenting is hard. This is brutal. It's like, here's my little angel. Not me at 2 a.m. You're like, yo, I love my baby. Right? So like that's part of it. Social media is a gallery. It's a curated gallery for you to put your best work up there. And the crazy part about it is it's a part of our business now. It's us having a Finsta for putting up how we want people to imagine we are. And even, like I said, hustle culture is a part of this toxicity that exists among creative professionals, because we have to post. We got to make people feel like we're moving on this. I'm tagging this. We're working together. We're doing this, right? And it's to let people know that we're moving up. And we do it oftentimes without even thinking about it. But if you're the outside person, there's like this baked in, like, dang, I'm getting down on myself because I'm looking at people who seem like they're having more opportunities. But again, oftentimes we get started with the project. I don't hear anything. All of a sudden, boom, product hits the shelf. Wasn't that awesome? No one's going to trash an employee or a project online, right? We're not going to do that because you're a working professional. But there's a lot of struggles that go on that we don't share on social. So you're just seeing the end result going, oh, dang, this person's crushing it. Wow, I'm super jealous that this person is getting this. Social is 100% a part of why we get in our heads. It's the unintended consequence of oversharing and having it be a part of our lives, but it's a part of our business. So it's like, how do we deal with this? How do we do this? F all that. Yeah, someone's like, yeah. So here's how collaboration can make you feel less like you're on an island. Because has anyone felt like that? Like you're designing stuff, you're on that hustle, you're grinding, you're doing something, and you feel like you're literally Tom Hanks in Castaway. I might be dating myself with this reference, but I'm screaming at Wilson, the beach ball with a bloody handprint on it that represents a face, and I'm like, Wilson, I made something. Tell me it's great. And it just sits there. I'm like, yes, thank you. Right? Because we can feel like that. Sometimes it feels like that. And that adds to burnout. That adds to people looking around and being like, you know what, is this all worth it? Is this industry worth it? It is. I want to look at how collaboration works because over the past couple years, some of our friends that have graduated from this program with me have gone on to work in Hollywood. I'm like fascinated by any giant system that works that has a big output. And Hollywood is like one of those things. We had someone who was here for the conference. Who was that? Yeah. Yeah. Sweet. So this is a very, very, very simplified version of how this process works. But what I think is really awesome about the way that Hollywood works is that you can be a creative professional that quote unquote stays in your own lane. And of course there are people who break out of those lanes all the time. But most importantly is that people are able to focus. They're able to be a professional this, and there is no expectation for them to be like, well, could you also do this? Again, this is a very simplified version. So let's look at the start of it, okay? Writers in Hollywood, probably the most overlooked people in all of Hollywood because they come up with these ideas. Of course, the latest thing, the studios, they want to see new, fresh, original ideas, so everything's a remake. Because they know that everyone's familiar with it, right? And Derek and I were just recently talking about the new Dune movie, and I'm like, sweet, but that was a book that was written in the 60s. That was a book that inspired Star Wars. That was a book that had source material from a person who sat down and was like, listen, I don't know what Frank Herbert was into, but he's pretty weird. But at some point, he wrote that down, and then there was a publisher that was like, oh, Frank, this is pretty weird. You got giant sandworms. You got people doing this spice stuff. Yeah, let's publish it. Let's do it. Then it would go on to be a movie made like almost 60 years later, right? A second movie almost 60 years later. Crazy, right? So the script starts off with this idea. This is a writer who comes up with this wacko idea, and then you find a person who's equally as wacko about it that's like, I'm going to spend $1 million bringing this to life. Your director. So the director is going to come in there. They're going to read this. They're going to come up with something in their brain. They're going to go, I have this vision for how I'm interpreting the words that you're putting on paper. So the director's got this idea, and the director sometimes is working with the writer, oftentimes not, which is frustrating, but Hollywood's getting a little bit better about that. But you have sometimes the director's going to take this source material, they're going to take this script, and they're going to go, okay, here's the vibe, right? Here's a reimagining of a concept, right? We have many times we see in literature a ton of big Hollywood stories that have very basic script ideas, right? They just change the characters around, blah, blah, blah. So the director is really important. From there, we go into concept art. So director could be a person who just is good at working as a team, they're good at pleasing a studio, they're good at doing whatever. But then we get into the concept art, the visual part. So you have artists that literally their job is to catch a vibe from the director, and the director's like, I want dark. I want this to be really like they're gonna be on this planet that's really cruel and mean and makes people hard and angry. And the concept artist goes, okay, cool, sounds good. And they draw these, they set a tone for how the movie's gonna look. The studio signs off on it, but these artists are illustrators. They're 3D renderers. They're people who work within these realms. And from there, the concept art goes on to production. So once the director's like, oh man, you guys nailed it, this looks awesome. We're gonna move on to production. Now we're gonna start bringing this stuff to life. Now mind you, the concept artist is a person who draws. They're a person who creates, they make illustrations, they set the tone. They'll be working on multiple projects. Once we get into physical production, those are your production houses. Those are building costumes. Those are embroiderers. Those are fabricators. Those are people who work with fiberglass. Those are people who work with fabrics. We have people who do sewing, stitching, literally full time. They just make costumes. They just make set pieces. They just do painting. Oftentimes, there's not this idea of like, okay, here, I need you got to sew this in 2 minutes, and then I need you to come over, and then you're going to paint this, and then we're going to go back, and then we're going to finish this thing off, right? Hollywood, for the most part, is pretty good about understanding that everyone has a specialty, and they respect it because those people get really good at that one thing, right? And then from there, we've got all these pieces. We have an awesome looking character. We're going to bring him into to cinematography. Now we're going to shoot with principal photography. This person's also going to be called the director of photography, and they've got multiple people. And what those people do is those people film. That's not the director oftentimes. The director is going, here's what I want to get, and the cinematographer is going to film and frame that up, right? Did anyone see Blade Runner 2049? Right? Just I mean, we could even go back. Let's really break it down. What was the last? Name a scene from a movie that you think that everyone can think of. We're almost getting to Christmas season. How about Buddy the Elf walking across Manhattan getting hit by a car? Right? You set the scene for this idiot-looking elf among New York City with all these people on the crosswalk. The reason that we can think and remember that is because of the cinematographer. The director is telling them what to do, but we remember that visual because of the cinematographer. Again, this more collaboration. Then we get, of course, the actor's performance, which is art on its own self. A director, a cinematographer, a director has to know that the performance that they're going to get out of the actor is fitting the vision of what they want. And oftentimes we see this. We have people like Gary Oldman, who you don't know it's Gary Oldman half the time because he's a good actor, right? Or you look at someone like, I'm trying to think, who was just recently in Dune? Rebecca Ferguson? I think so. You look at actors and you just see how some people transform into roles. You almost forget that you're watching an actor. You just dive into their character, right? Also an art form. And then you have the editor that takes all of these crazy clips, and there's multiple takes. There's some directors who will do 30 takes to get it right. And the editor is going to go through with the director, and they're going to pick out to make it so that this movie makes sense chronologically. It tells the story the way that they shot it. And that person literally is just an editor. And then from there, then we add in our VFX. We add in a horribly, horribly underrepresented, overlooked, important part of the fact that we have so much good sci-fi right now, and we have also tons of things like VFX houses that literally just add lights on buildings because you'd be shocked at how much stuff gets added in post, right? So we have our visual effects that get added. But the important part is that oftentimes all of these different parts are individual. They're individual people. They're people that don't... Ghostbusters is coming up. These people don't cross the streams. You like that reference? That was good. Yes. So all of these people are pros in their own realm, in their own line, right? So let's really break this down to show what this looks at. I'm a Star Wars fan. I want to show how these things come to be about. Has anyone seen The Mandalorian? Anyone watch this? Yes, my people. This is what The Mandalorian originally looked like. That's concept artist Brian Matthias. That his role, before anything gets started, before they cast, before they do anything, his job is to come up with concepts so that the director is, some of the ideas of what The Mandalorian looked like before he became this were insane. Like fur coats, had like spikes on his helmet. It was like crazy stuff. But that's all to narrow in what The Mandalorian actually is going to look like. So the director's going to choose on that stuff. But most importantly, you have a script which defines what the character is going to look like, what the character is going to do. The script says that this is a lone wolf. Okay, so we've got this idea that he's a bounty hunter. He's resourceful. So he's got all these different parts on his armor that he's picked up over time from kicking the crap out of half the galaxy, right? The director's like, this looks awesome. Let's go ahead and move forward with this. Now we go into physical. Now we actually start building stuff. This is a completely different person than Brian and John and Dave, but they're signing off on it. But now we have Legacy Studios out of California that's actually building this, and they're bringing this to life. And the director comes in and looks at it and goes, this is exactly what I imagine. And they go, we know. We're professionals. Oh, so you signed off on it. So Then we have sets. Then we have people who just work in backgrounds. We have people who work in large scale sets. We have people who are costumers for background characters to make it so that you don't get Jeans guy from season 2. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Well, you're going to learn something today. It's literally, there was just an assistant who had a pair of jeans on and a t-shirt, and he was accidentally like in the back of one shot, and then the internet like lost their mind over it. Who's that guy? Jeans guy. He had like an Apple Watch on. He was just in the background. You know, stuff. But then you go into the director, you go into the actor. The director and the actor are getting these performances that are memorable, that make us feel the way that we do about the character, that have us buy into stuff, right? That have us buy into storylines, have us buy into the idea that we want to see more. And then from here, then the director of photography is giving us iconic scenes that we remember. The editor is making so that the hits, the transitions, they all hit together. They make us like, oh, I remember that. Remember when there was that standoff and they were standing there and there was a lot of like trigger finger, ooh, you know, it was like basically just ripped off that movie, right? So you go in from here and we've got the visual effects of this TIE fighter coming down and everything. This is a full collaboration to get to. We don't think about that stuff, right? As the end user, we just remember the show. We just remember, I watched that show. It was awesome. We talk about the show. We talk about what happened. But look at all of the things that led up to us talking about this show in the Masonic building on a Saturday morning in November, right? We think about that. All of these are creative positions. Every single one of them is a creative profession, a creative position that's a full-time position, that is a person who has dedicated themselves to becoming the best version of whatever that position is. They all work together to make a memorable final product, and they respect that this person is the best at paint. This person is chosen because they make the best costumes for what we're looking for. The editor is perfect. The sound, the cinematography, all of that stuff. And we're sitting here going, okay, what does that have to do with me? We're thinking about collaboration. Now, I too am not a Hollywood creative. I'm here in Marquette, Michigan, trying to ask a restaurant to like, hey, throw me a couple bucks, I'll make you a couple t-shirts. A little different than making The Mandalorian. But in small communities like ours, we've got to pick each other up. We've got to work together. We've got to highlight each other. That's a really important part of keeping things like Revolve going, so that we feel like we're all part of this, that we're not fighting each other over this, that we're working together, that we're highlighting when some of us recognize that there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of interesting things going on, right? We've got to maintain this ecosystem. Now, it's really hard to imagine yourself of going, well, this person comes up with all the things, right? If I hire someone who's creative, has anyone else heard this? By the way, this is always funny to me. When someone goes, like, asks you to do something that's completely out of your realm, and then they tell you that you're creative, just come up with it, right? Like, hey, could you paint like a pinstripe on my car? Come on, you're creative. I'm like, what? You want me to go to automotive pinstriping school and put that on so that it's done right? What are you talking about? I hear this a lot. And this is a misconception that a lot of times our clients have, where they go, I don't know this stuff. I'm not creative. You're the creative one. And I'm sitting here going, well, it still is your business. You should know how you want your business to be portrayed. I can help you with that. But just because I'm creative doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to also creatively think about how you want your business to be represented, right? So even if we just start in a very small version of our ecosystem, right? So let's refer to ourselves as visualists, right? If you do any kind of photography, graphic design, illustration, right? If you look at all the things that we work on, if we're in physical products, which is what a lot of small communities, that's where a lot of the business is. Let's say it's even as something like, I work for Fox Motors, or I work for a car dealership that wants to, hey, we're gonna team up and try to sell more of these cars. I work with I'm going to work with Upper Peninsula Supply Co. We need it, right? We've got these products that we come up with that need support to get it out there into our modern mediums. Older audiences will go to TV6. Modern audiences will go, younger audiences will go to Instagram, Facebook ads, Google ads, all of that stuff, right? We need to be able to show that and represent that. So now we have to work together to get video, to do, Google's going to say that anything with video is going to be, it's going to reach your audience better than a flat version of a clickable ad. Okay, well, I'm only a graphic designer, so what the heck do I do now? If only there was a person who was able to operate a camera that I could work with and collaborate with, right? And so we get into photo and video. The two of us need each other. Movie posters need a great photographer to take a picture of said Mandalorian, and then a graphic designer will come in and add the text and make sure everything balances. They look at it different. Then we get into marketing. Do we have anybody who's in marketing here? Hey. So marketing people, my favorite because I hate it. I'm so disorganized. I'm just not my brain. It's not my brain. I do not do marketing stuff. I look at a big sheet of paper and I'm like, yeah, someone else is going to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I worked with a very talented marketer at NMU for a long time. She just recently left, but she was my person. I would run ideas by her. Hey, I have this idea. What do we want to do? Okay, well, this is this. Knows marketing platforms like the back of their hand. And we would challenge each other. Well, this message is going to hit better. Well, I need to push this so that people actually know it. We're fighting each other over it, but it's the best kind of fighting. But we need marketing people to either get the products of what we make where to go, right? They're going to get what we make out to the people. They're people that oftentimes get overlooked because you know what? This takes a lot of time. Marketing takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to know that if you're going to spend someone else's money on promoting whatever their product is, luckily we have a lot of analytics now. We can look through and say, yeah, people didn't click on this design that you made, but people really clicked on this. Okay, that gives us a little bit of insight here, but that takes time. If you're a creative person, you're making t-shirts, you're making money, your job is to make a product that sells. A marketing person is going to also help you get that out there. But oftentimes we need that feedback to be able to help us guide what's working. From there, we go in with writers. This is kind of an outlier because oftentimes we don't realize how bad at writing or copywriting or scripting or in general just coming up with social media content. As a graphic designer, I'm terrible at this. But I work with people that are more in line with, they teeter right between here. Copywriters, actual authors. We do a alumni magazine with Northern. There are writers who actually write that stuff because I'll interview someone and I'll get this great interview that we have. And I'm like, okay, cool, just use what they said. That's not very compelling. But when writers put it together, they frame it. They're artists in their own way for using writers. That, again, originally, half of Hollywood is because of a writer coming up with an idea that we can start to visualize it and see it. That's where writers come in. So we have this circle in a small little environment like we have. All of these people, sometimes they could be multiple people. Sometimes you could be a visualist and a writer. Sometimes you could be a visualist and a marketer. You can be a visualist that's also photo video. They're kind of part and the same. Oftentimes we can see that those people will get there, but as we elevate each other through collaboration, you end up realizing you need help to be able to focus and expand and scale accordingly. Eventually you'll get to a point where if you recognize that I'm making so many t-shirts that are making money, I got to spend my time making money and let somebody else collaborate with you to get more of those t-shirts out the door, right? This ecosystem has been what I've been involved in probably since 2005. And here's how we all win. Here's how collaboration can help us, especially in a small town like Marquette where we're all trying to stay afloat, living here in not the biggest market when we know that it's crazy because you could go and any of us could probably get hired multiple times in a bigger market, but we're like fighting, right? We're fighting either together or amongst ourselves to try and keep these jobs going. But your ideas are elevated by others who also want upward momentum. The idea when we collaborate with people is that if I'm going to eat, you're going to eat, right? And you get to focus on specifics. At the beginning of it all, right, we have our toolbox of generalized things. Like the beginning of this, I'm like, I need better photos. And I'm a graphic designer. So now I went out and bought a camera like an idiot. And I went on YouTube and I'm like, I'm going to learn how to become a photographer. My dad's a photographer. My dad used to shoot all of the big threes, cars, and I grew up in that. And for some reason, I just thought I'd be able to just pick it up, right? It's a digital camera. I don't have to even develop film anymore. This is super easy. And then I realized, I'm like, oh yeah. That's why there were 30 people working on that job. Right. I'm not a great photographer. Sold the camera, okay? But what's most important is that you respect other people who work in these, who have focused on these things, that people who have focused on being writers have maintained that they're really good at being writing, at writing. You work with a graphic designer who you respect, and sometimes other graphic designers can work with other graphic designers, and cinematographers can have backup cinematographers and assistant photographers, all of this stuff. We can work together. We can respect that each individual, what did I say at the beginning? Gosh, I don't even know what that word is. And that some people are masters within their niche. And you know what? What did I say about the illustration, right? You've been drawing for 30 years. Ain't no 5-minute YouTube video gonna fix that. That takes time. Being a master at something takes time, right? The Gladwell theory, 10,000 hours, right? So the idea that we'd be able to do all these things, sure, we can understand them, we can talk about them, we can explain ourselves, and that through collaboration makes it easier for us to explain our ideas. But most importantly, respect each other, and that some of us got focused on certain things, some of us are better at other things. Collaboration makes it so that the elevated product right here is all upward momentum. We save time and we manage expectations for clients. Coming in, if I have a client, right, going all the way back to our beginning of our slide, can you take pictures? 10 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, I could figure it out. Client's like, these aren't great. And me in the back of my head, I'm like, I know. Let me come in and take more pictures for you, see what I can do, right? Now, at this point, bake that into your price. If I go in, I sell someone, I say, yeah, well, let's do this. Here's what we've done. We make this project, like, what do you want to do? You want to highlight? You want to sell your product? Let's have it through dynamic photography. We got to put that on social. We got to have a big social media presence. We need content. Content, making it as a graphic designer on its own right, that takes time. Having really dynamic photography, that takes time. Me and that are not the same. So when I tell people I work with Josh LeClaire, I work with Ryan Stevens, okay, what does that cost? Here, right up front. Whew. This is how we give you the best product that you deserve. Okay, there's a very clear understanding then that I'm working with a team that gives people confidence that we're working with a team, right? We stay inspired and we stay challenged. There's people that I love and respect. There's other graphic designers that I love and respect that I have. Just want to make sure I'm not running over on time here. There's other graphic designers that I love and respect that graduated with me that I love their work. I love the clients that they get. I'm jealous of some of the clients that they get, some of the opportunities, right? But I trust them to give me feedback because we have a different line of where we've gone, right? They chose to go into this realm, and I got to respect that. I love that. We can insist, we can work together and manage our own expectations of work and life balance, because that's super important, getting back to the mental side of this, right? If we're creative people, oftentimes we have to tap into the emotional part of what helps us sell products, right? Oftentimes we have another human that is interacting with our products, so oftentimes we get tapped into thinking about things emotionally. The problem is that when you're all emotional all the time, and turning that off to represent that as a business, it's really hard. So you have other people who understand that. You have other people who say, hey, I'm feeling kind of fried on this. Could you help me come up with something that helps us all in all maintain a creative profession? Because we've all been there, right? We've all been on those islands. And our weaknesses don't need to be made apparent. Marketing is my biggest thing that I suck at it. I have ideas, but a person's going to tell me, a marketing professional is going to tell me, that's not going to work. This will work. Okay. Now I'm thinking, okay, if these are the expectations and these are the parameters, now I get to be creative again, rather than thinking, well, I have to sift through 14 pages of Google AdWords. I can't do this, right? Tap into each other for that. It's also about being real with each other. I think this is probably one of the most overlooked parts of collaborating, is that we all have bills to pay, right? If I see this a lot because a lot of my students kind of fell into this trap, this idea of, hey, this person said they wanted to like work with me. And I'm like, yeah, you deserve it. What do you get out of it? If there's a company who wants to collaborate with you and they plan on selling like $20,000 worth of something that you made the art for and you get like $100 for it, that ain't a collaboration. That's highway robbery, right? Highlighting each other. If you're going to have this be a thing where say, hey, I can't pay you outright for the fee that you want, then I have to know and I have to have this inherited respect for each other that says that let's do this together. Let me know how I can highlight you so that you feel like if you're giving me some time, you're giving me some of your talent, I want to be able to highlight it and platform it so that we can both feel fulfilled if we're going to give each other some favors. And I see this a lot with photographers and designers, and I see this a lot with marketing people. Okay, cool, well just tag me, keep talking about it. I've gotten my photographers a lot of other jobs because I push them out there. Give me a deal on this because I'm pitching another deal, right? So we can be collaborative about how we're highlighting each other. This thing though, this drives me nuts. You ever gone into the bank and they're like, listen, your mortgage is due. And I'm like, well, I'd really like to highlight River Valley Bank on my social media to let people know they should come here. The person's like, yeah, I don't care about that. I need money. So I can't pay for things with exposure. We do this to each other as creatives. Stop doing this, right? Be upfront. Just tell people, I don't have any money to pay you. Are you willing to take on the job? If the person says no, that's cool. See ya. That's fine. Respect that. Boom. Power to the creatives. Okay? But this part, highlighting other creatives, building a business model off of taking advantage of young creatives, that's not sustainable. It won't work. It burns out over time. I've seen it 100 times at this point. Okay? So we've also got to be real with each other. We got to be real that the expectations are being pushed out there, that we can connect with each other. I recently just kind of stepped away, but for the past 5 years, I've been building up Diggs, the restaurant right downtown there. And through my friend Josh LeClaire Photography, who I've been working with we graduated together. So since 2007, Josh and I have been kind of a tandem. Whenever I need photography, I call him up. And I know that I've got a great actor. Everyone's laughing because they know Pat Dignight is a character. And he trusts me that whatever I put him in to do, me as the director, whatever I put him there to do, it's gonna represent his business, which is Diggs, well. And that Josh, the photographer, is also gonna know that he's gonna get stuff that's dynamic. And I love to highlight what he does, because everything about this is part of their business. Their drunken debauchery, completely ridiculous bar in town was 100% designed that way. All of this was a collaborative effort. There's no way that me as a graphic designer could ever convince you that it was the funniest bar in town by just making menus, by just making posts online. I have to work with the people who are there. I have to work with the product. I have to represent that, and I can't just do that as a graphic designer, right? And even as a photographer, if Josh was to go in here and say, okay, I think I'm gonna take some pictures of your restaurant. No, he needs me to say, here's what we're going to do, because we're cross-marketing. This is a full collaboration effort. One of the things that I recently that our final show, some of you have been involved with this show at this point, the Culture of Cult Art Series. Started this in 2014. This was a biannual art show that we've done. This will be the 10th show. But I needed other professionals to start this thing. We wanted a pop-up art show that was going to be at the Ordoc. I'm like, oh, well, should I invite other graphic designers and other artists that I'm intimidated by because their work is amazing and it would outshine my work? Yes. Yes, I need that. Yes, the show needs that. Yes, for people who attend to see the show and get blown away by the art, you need more people to collaborate on. The shows have been incredible. The shows have been some of the highlight of my creative career. And what it's done is for some other people, it's connected other artists with other artists because of what we've been able to put together. So collaboration is part of what makes our ecosystem move forward. It makes Marquette a more fun place to be a part of rather than knives out and thinking because we're in a small market, we're all going to run out of money. So the future for us is asking for help also establishes trust. Saying that if I need Derek to work on something with me, that I respect his skill set and he's going to trust me that I'm not doing it for nefarious reasons. I'm not doing it to get rich off his work. There has to be a trust. There has to be an understanding up front when we collaborate with each other. Because I can tell you the quickest way to squash a collaboration is when someone feels like they're getting the raw end of the deal. And that can happen. This is a business at the beginning. At the end of the day, it is a business. We're operating to make money, right? Working together, though, widens our scope. If I don't have to focus on something, if I know that my vision for whatever I'm coming up with, the photographer is going to nail that, that lets me start to think bigger. That lets me start to think, hey, could we try to do this? And a photographer is going to either rope me in or say, let's do it. It's competitive out there, but you amongst ourselves are not competition. That part of it is important. That if we start isolating ourselves and thinking, I can't work with other people, that starts to seal you off. And I can tell you that any plant that doesn't get watered is going to die eventually. And if that's your creative spirit, you need each other, right? You need each other for that. And the more people, the better the party. Ain't that true? Now, I'm with it, trust me. You want to have a one-person dance party, you go for it. Because I've seen it work for some people, but I've also seen it not be sustainable. Because eventually you get tired. Eventually you start looking around and say, okay, this isn't as fun as it used to be, right? The more people, the better the party. Coming up with something, I look at when we do a production for NMU, when we do a production for Diggs, when we do a production in general, the art shows, the more creative input and that everyone feels the same way about it. At the end of the day, that project is over. We look at it, dang, we killed that, we crushed that. Makes everybody feel better, right? That's the beauty of collaboration. Is when you work together on something that you're all really proud of, okay, boom, that project's done. Let's move on to the next one. So again, thank you for listening to the importance of collaboration. Like I said, I was a late bloomer to the idea of working with other people who were better than me. And that was probably about 10 years ago. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to finally have to throw in the towel and say there's other people that I need to work with. And I can't imagine it being any different now. So thank you for listening. Go Revolve CC. This is awesome. Are there any questions? We only got a couple minutes, but are there any questions? Yeah. So this is what I'll generally say. Some might disagree, but if you only have one idea, the idea ain't that good. Sure. No, but really, I think about this because some people are like, they're so like, I can't let anybody else up because this idea is so good. That's such a disgrace to our human brains to think that if something gets stolen or we lose this idea or the idea changes, that's it, we're done. We'll never be able to come up with something again. So the idea of getting over that hump is starting off with people that you trust, starting off with people and being vulnerable about it. Hey, I've got this idea, but I don't know how to do this. Admitting that's the first thing that I said. I want to learn how to do this. Let another professional help me explain it. Okay, what are the things that are going to hold me back about this? And a photographer will tell you, well, here's what we've got. Here's the scene that we're looking at. Okay, now I can start to go back to the drawing board and think about doing that. But I think it's starting off with people that you trust. I think, and they don't have to necessarily be creative. Even just having conversations about creative ideas for people who think that they aren't creative, any feedback is human feedback, right? And at the end of the day, we all have products that are designed for other humans. So I would start there. Get started there. Get the idea out of your brain and onto paper, because then once it's out there and there's other interaction with it, something cool could happen. There's another question. Oh. Yeah, I know we've worked together too. In general, I'm kind of like if you keep putting cool stuff out there just for yourself, keep drawing, keep designing, come up with wacky ideas for whatever reason, they get picked up because people can recognize that there's something about passion at work, right? And though oftentimes, and Marquette is horrible about it. Marquette has no idea what actual creative costs actually, the value of things, right? And so we're getting better at that because we're getting more people from outside of the area that are sitting here going, yeah, I cannot work for someone for $200 a week with a $5,000 camera and $5,000 lights and then a $2,000 MacBook, like all of that stuff. Like we're getting better about it, right? But what's going to happen is eventually, I think that we're going to start to see that the companies that are providing said resources are going to start getting other people more involved and kind of looking at it and saying, we're not going to get the results that we want. And that's really where I think the change is going to come from, is the pocketbook. If eventually over time your event gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you realize we have to change something to market it better or do something better, or we have to get more people involved, I think that's where it's going to come from. So it's not a bad thing, but in terms of being creative, we have to put more stuff out there as passion projects to get the wheels turning. Doesn't have to necessarily be monetary, and I know that those two things sometimes go hand in hand, but that's what I've found that has worked for me. Yeah, I think, and that's a great point. That if anyone didn't hear, it was what happens when a project goes south, and then you're attached to it. Oftentimes, even when I represent myself, sometimes like we've never been busier at NMU. I have a couple freelance clients have been like completely burning right now, and I apologize if you're here. I'm trying to sleep, but a lot of that, in my opinion, it's okay to not broadcast everything that you do. Because there are projects that have hit around town that I did that y'all don't know about. And sometimes that's just to let that end user, let them take it and say, hey, I want you to take this. I want you to own this. This is your thing. Cool. And I want you, and a lot of times too, if we bash, we butt heads, I say, I love that you're this passionate about it. And I love that you feel like this is what will be best for you. So I want you to take this and run with it. I appreciate that we worked up to this point, and I think it's just more of saying that eventually what happens when you butt heads is like someone just wants to take ownership of it and change that they feel like they know. And I say this with my clients. Sometimes I'll go, I recommend you do this, and they go, I got it. And at the end of the day, that's their job. The end result is for the last person to push it out to say, this is how I want to represent my company. Hey, that's cool. And I just usually make it a clean break to say, if this is what you think will best serve you, rock it, run with it. And then from there, let the after decide how well it went. But if you did your part honestly, that's the way I look at it. If you did your part honestly, and you did your part to the point to say, yeah, I put in what I put in, that shouldn't change the way of how you feel about your own work, right? So hope that helps. Cool, I think we're good. Thank you, everyone. Cool. Stay creative. Stay weird. Thanks.